Welcome back to another episode of the Block Runner Podcast. I'm your host, William, always here with your co-host, Iman.
What's going on, dude?
On the 6, we got TJ.
Hello.
All right, dude. We don't have internet.
Yeah, it feels weird.
It's super weird.
Yeah, we're...
It's the most debilitating thing. You have electricity, but no internet.
Yeah, you would think we would seize this opportunity to go,
Touch grass.
Frolic about outdoors.
No, absolutely not.
You don't want to fire up the grill, dude?
Literally just sitting and waiting for the
agents to come back online?
Yes, dude.
To get your...
my super intelligence back online.
Like, William, I am back. Yeah, what do you want it to say? It's like, if it were to say anything, when it comes back online, like...
Finally, the agent has come back.
It speaks in the third person?
It's The Rock, dude.
It's The Rock, dude.
Oh. Wait, what? Say that again?
You don't remember that?
He didn't say that.
Yeah, he did.
Sure he
Every
did.
time he came into the stadium, he was like, finally, The Rock has come back to the Superdome.
Shit, dude, you're right. You had to say it like that for it to like click.
I caught on, Will.
Yeah, thank you, dude.
Yeah, brought back some memories, dude. Wow. Yeah, The Rock does come back like that. It's pretty interesting. And then Stone Cold comes in and is like, wait, what does he say? He's like, I don't... Wait. He says things.
The thumbnail needs to be Will dressed as The Rock.
Yes.
Done.
I mean, I guess the audience hasn't seen the videos. We haven't released them yet, but I turned into a superhero in one of these videos.
Yeah, we'll get to releasing them very soon. And yeah, it's the more highly edited, highly scripted stuff, which is like...
High for us, right?
Yeah,
We're talking
for
about
us.
an edited, scripted hook.
Yes, which is something we've always hoped and desired to one day be able to fulfill. And we've arrived to that destination largely because of AI assistance. Now makes it like...
I would agree.
Yeah, that it makes it more viable because in context of we're not just like a content channel, right? It's like if we were just content creators,
Yeah.
we would have done this a long time ago.
True.
The hyper edited scripted stuff.
Yes.
But
Yeah, there's a lot of factors that went into that because a lot of the times we talk about crypto projects that are relevant in that specific time.
yeah, so it's like we got good information, right? It's just the packaging of that is very important. Like
It's
for like
the timing.
yeah. But like I saw a YouTuber recently. It was like a girl YouTuber, crypto YouTuber. I don't know her name, but she's out there. But she had like 90,000 followers, 3 times what we got,
That's right.
and like 1/10 of the amount of videos that we've created.
Yeah.
I was like, holy shit. So she's
So
been
how
at it for
often
like 2 years.
does she post videos though?
Maybe like once a week or 1 or 2 a week.
Okay.
But yeah, they are the highly edited type of video you would expect, right? So
Is it the same girl that I showed you the other day? The one that like
no.
walks around like different parts of the city and like
I mean, I would search for it, but
yeah.
internet's down, by the way.
This is third world, dude.
These laptops are just props.
Yeah.
It's true. It's just to cover my man boobs at this point, dude. That's the only reason why it's on the table for now. But yeah, so we can't search anything. But yeah, it got me thinking. It's like, damn, dude. It's like maybe that's all we're missing is like just a new model, right? A new format. New
Yeah.
style.
I mean,
But
I knew that people really enjoyed the super processed videos, but
yeah,
I don't know. It just required way too much effort.
it's also
on our
not
part.
naturally attuned to our personalities, I guess, because it's like I don't know. We just like to just talk.
Yeah, vibe.
Yeah. So that's why we started as a podcast. But yeah, it's if the game is capturing attention, you got to do it, per like I guess industry norms. if
Yeah, you got to
will.
serve processed food, right? If you want to make money.
Something like that. Yeah. So that content will come out. It's not
Yeah.
full all the way, so it's like a hybrid between like, adopting some of these again, content norms, these content standards of like packaging things into a more hook grabby way,
Yeah.
but still keeping like our proprietary style, I guess.
The authenticity.
Yeah, which is what we're doing right now, right?
Yeah.
It's like packaging that up into a semi-shorter form of content.
Yeah, so those videos should be out pretty soon, maybe this coming week, right?
Should be.
Yeah.
I mean, it might actually be one may have already been posted. So,
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know exactly how you're going to be able to differentiate. We're going to have to figure that out, right? Because basically we have like 3 product types on this channel now. We got the full length podcast. That's what this is.
Mm-hmm.
We've got like our spontaneous 20-minute videos, which is basically like a shortened podcast. You know, we just did one on Potensor, for example.
Yeah. Which
Tau.
got a lot of views because everybody was talking about it. And that's
Yeah.
kind of,
It's kind of the point.
yeah.
It's like, you know, that if something's popping off, we reserve the ability to just fire up the camera and just, you know, yap about it.
That's right.
And then there's the more scripted things. You might take a few weeks of planning and editing and all that to
Yeah.
kind of like put that together. So, and those are typically more like AI focused, right?
Yeah. The hooks, they have a lot of AI generated videos.
That too.
And there's like a whole story behind the hook and everything. And that's part of like the purpose of kind of the showcase of the video is that projects, companies are going to be leveraging these AI technologies and package them up into like a series format, right? And so I've seen some projects start doing like a series of AI videos that create like a series of, videos. It's like a story, like a show. And I feel like a lot of the projects are going to be leveraging that.
Yeah.
And so we sort of like naturally thought about doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like it's also, if we're going to talk about AI the way we talk about crypto, we have to have some sort of like backing of credibility. That's how I think of it, right? Our credibility for even attempting to have a crypto channel comes from our track record, I guess you will.
Yeah.
Our trophy case that's not on display, but it's out there if you can like aggregate all the, good predictions, if you will. Potensor being another one, right? That's why we just released a video claiming we were right.
Yep.
Which, as weird as that kind of feels to say, it feels kind of like douchey. A little pompous.
It does, but I mean, it's also a fact.
And it has to be said, again, for credibility's sake, right? Otherwise, like, why would you watch some YouTubers out there talking about crypto if you don't know if they actually have the ability to identify value within it, right? So
yeah, and that BitTensor isn't the only time we've discovered value way before everyone else.
Yeah, go back to ordinals, the bitmap ecosystem stuff that did like 1,000x or something. DMT stuff, several thousand X's.
Yep.
The metaverse stuff, NFT stuff, DeFi, like all these things we covered over the years, right? So, but in AI, that's not what AI is. It's like,
you don't get 1,000x with ChatGPT.
If you're gonna talk about AI, hopefully you have some way to demonstrate that you're actually utilizing it in an effective way, right? So it's like these little intro video sequences is one layer of a demonstration.
Yeah, we've been experimenting too with Seedance, and it hasn't been working out too well just because the API provider is just not working.
Yeah,
but I would expect us to do way more Seedance stuff once it's all working, because I think it's probably one of the better video generation models out there.
Probably. Yeah, there's something going on with the video space. Sora just shut down, and apparently like it just happened abruptly toward like Disney was like on board with OpenAI to do like $1 billion deal with them and give them like IP rights, but like OpenAI pulled the plug without even telling them, and now Disney's like pissed off, so they're probably gonna get another lawsuit coming pretty soon.
Yeah,
but yeah, it's like what's going on?
That's crazy.
With like the generative video realm. Maybe like Seedance is like,
yeah, I think Seedance is really stomping on some fools right now.
Yeah, so like OpenAI has to do some recalculations, right? It's like, we're not gonna commit to this burn when we know like no one's gonna use our products.
Yeah.
And I think everyone else is kind of refactoring that.
Yeah, I remember when Sora V2 came out, whatever it's called. It was like really good, and then Seedance started leaking, and it was just like everyone forgot about everything else.
Pretty much, yeah. So we need to get our hands on that too, so that again we can kind of like verify.
Yeah.
That these things are as good as they claim to be.
Yeah, and these outputs that people are kind of going crazy over, it takes real effort, real time to get really good outputs, right? You don't just say Tom Cruise fighting Neo and you get like great stuff.
Yeah.
Like you can't just do that.
It might be okay.
With Seedance, it might be okay, but
yeah. But if you want like precision to, to cinema quality.
Yeah.
It's obviously, there's an art to it, a new art,
Yeah.
new art style of art, which, the existing artists may not appreciate or
Right.
label as such, but it's quickly becoming the reality of like, how you do things in the new way. Right.
Yeah.
So we're trying to unpackage as much as we can around that. And on top of that, leverage other layers of what we're up to as more like surface area demonstration stages, right? Including the product that we've been working on, NAT.FUN.
Yep.
There are some interesting new like AI integrations there that I think can actually be very, I don't know if disruptive is the right word, but very interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting is definitely the right word.
Yeah, because the canvas is pretty much infinite, like with this AI stuff. So I think we should just get into it, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, we can't like show anything.
Yeah,
the plan was to show
the whole platform.
everything.
Yeah.
Which I know people would appreciate, right?
Yeah.
It'd be nice to kind of like see what we've spent basically like an entire year building towards.
Yeah, so if you're watching this on Saturday and just wait till Monday.
Yeah, we'll release something else.
Yeah, wait till Monday, and as you're watching the Monday's video, NAT.FUN should be live.
Yeah.
And so you can start interacting with whatever's deployed on there. So
so if you can without actually looking at anything.
Well, what you can do right now is go to NAT.FUN and look at the teaser.
Yeah. It's the splash page where you're claiming a block.
Yeah.
And no, we're not doing bitmap again. That's not
No.
why you're claiming blocks. It's simply just like an identity system.
Yeah.
In the flavoring of DMT, right? It's like,
specifically for humans are claiming blocks, right? Because you have to connect a Twitter account. Yeah.
So no agents allowed.
Well, no
claiming.
agents can use the platform for sure, but only humans are claiming blocks.
Now, what if agents start getting their own X profiles?
Well, some agents do have their X profile. So,
it's true.
So if your agent has an X profile, they can get a block.
Like AIXVT?
Correct.
So he may have his own block one day. He or she, whatever it is.
The
purple frog.
Yes, it could.
So that's the only real constraint then. Doesn't matter what species you are.
Yeah, so I'm sure what species.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're asking is like, what do you do with these blocks?
Yeah.
And so right now it's just an identity system, but your identity is tied to a block on Bitcoin, and we're thinking about making these into NFTs, but I don't know if that really makes sense. So we don't know.
Yeah, at least not out the gate. And
Yeah.
I think why it may not make sense out the gate is because it's not a demonstration of like how the NFT distribution mechanism on that
Correct.
fund.
It's not. Yeah.
It's separate, right? So which is not really a problem. It's just it just doesn't make sense, right?
Yeah. So what is NAT.FUN?
Yeah, so it starts with that, right?
Yeah.
As an onboarding experience.
Yeah. So NAT.FUN is our solution to what we deem a problem within the NFT space. And that problem is not obvious to probably everybody in the industry. Why do I say that? Is because Magic Eden just left Ordinals and other networks, and they're focusing on Solana. Magic Eden is less focused on NFTs. They're doing some sort of, I don't know,
Dicing?
dice game thing.
Yeah, it's
gambling.
It's gambling.
The whole world is gambling right now.
It's
It's not even just crypto. It's just the whole world.
Yeah, I think that's our focus. It's a gambling / like Pokemon card ripping type activities.
Yeah.
Or just card ripping. That's the retail activities they're kind of supporting now, right?
Yeah, and so Opensea, they're not really focused on NFTs either.
Yeah, they're really not. They're more so marketing themselves as like basically an exchange. Like, if they want to be viewed as like an aggregate of token trading, right?
Yeah.
It's like, trade your shitters over here.
Right.
Which, that is a symptom of, what Pump.Fun did to the market, basically.
Right.
It's like, they proliferated a lot of market exuberance around meme coins and not so much around, the value add of NFTs.
Yeah.
Because they completely like neglected even the involvement of where NFTs should, if they should play a role at all within that ecosystem. So.
Yeah, and so we're talking about Magic Eden and Opensea because they're like the remaining big players in the NFT space, right?
Pretty much.
But I say remaining because we've had like 10 different platforms completely disappear over the last 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
And those platforms, they disappeared because the volumes on NFTs completely evaporated.
Mm-hmm.
But the volumes evaporating isn't the problem. That is a symptom of the problem. And so the real problem is when NFTs were launched, the systemic launch mechanism for NFTs was a pre-hype campaign. Creator sets a price, and then you launch a drop date, and then there was an avalanche of people buying those NFTs because they assumed someone else would buy it at a higher price and there would be some ROI, right?
Yeah.
If you're an early participant. So that worked really well in 2021 and 2022. I mean, it was a good stretch to the tune of like 50 billion in volume.
Mm-hmm.
And so people thought there was a new industry. People were comparing NFTs to iPhones. Remember that?
Yeah.
And the whole planet was like, what are these NFT things? The whole world we're talking about NFTs.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. I saw I don't know if you know who the Nelk Boys are.
The who?
I knew you wouldn't. The Nelk Boys.
Nook?
Nelk.
Nelk?
Like you think elk with an N. Nelk.
No, I don't know. The Nelk Boys, dude.
Damn it, dude. How do you?
Is this a boy band? You're into boy bands or what?
No, dude. They're like fucking ragers, like frat guys, and they're.
TJ, do you know what he's talking about?
Yes.
Oh my god.
Yeah, dude.
I've been on the internet before.
Yeah, I've experienced culture. Yeah, but these guys are very influential people. They're like up there with Joe Rogan in the.
Oh, I think I know who you're. I guess
they have a podcast.
They have a podcast,
called
right?
Full Send.
Okay, I think I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, but the point is, I watched because now they're kind of like going through some ruckus where they're breaking up their little friend group.
Oh, they're too good for each other.
Yeah, whatever. Just typically, there's money. It's like the separation device in most cases.
Yeah,
and I think that's the case here. But somebody packaged all the drama because I haven't been keeping up with it. I just hear their name. They're part of the, the circus that got Trump elected. Basically,
I see. Yeah.
The circus ring
Sure.
of like Trump went on these podcasts to get mainstream attention.
Sure.
But yeah, part of like what made them blow up was their involvement in NFTs, because they remember Maddie, our old friend DCL blogger. He created Metakey, which is basically an access pass NFT.
Mm-hmm.
You buy this NFT, and it's just basically it can get you access to whatever the hell that the creator ends up
partnering with
down the line. So they basically took that whole model.
Yeah, at its all-time high was like 30 grand for one of those things, right?
Yeah, I mean it became its own category on Opensea.
That's right.
Access NFTs, I think, or
yeah.
whatever. Like he was like the first one to kind of like package that together. But the Nelk guys, they used that to their advantage to the point where they raised $25 million, creating their own thing. I think it was called a Meta card. I'm not even kidding. They took almost his whole brand and everything.
Wow.
I didn't know this until I watched this documentary. I was like, holy shit, dude. So
they have a documentary of this?
Somebody on the internet is
damn.
made this because it's like now they're breaking up. How did they become so big? But the origins root in NFTs, and it's like just a representation of how things got so out of control.
Yeah.
Or like these YouTubers were just weaponizing NFTs for, these types of.
Yeah, so this is a good example. So how much are these meta cards worth?
Well, there was only 10,000 of them, so they must have been 2,500 a pop, right?
2,500, yeah.
So 25 million?
Yeah, 25 million.
They were 2,300.
2,300?
It was called the Full Send Meta Card.
Did you buy one of these or what?
No,
you're looking at it.
Looking at him.
He's a member, dude.
Yeah, I was gonna say, dude. It's like
he's wearing the underwear.
Yeah, you want one?
Yeah. Well, guess how much they sell for now? $50.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Still kind of high.
It's still overvalued. But the things they were promising at the time were insane. Like they were promising to open like a full branch of gyms, Full Send gyms. So if you hold one of these NFTs, basically you got lifetime membership to this gym network.
$25 million is not a lot of money if you're trying to set up a physical gym.
Right. Well, forget about logistics. Just hear the pitch, right? It's gyms, and then it's like, all right, that's just phase one of the roadmap, right? Phase two, it's like, then we're going to create a casino. You hold one of these cards, you basically get in with the red red carpet. You
Yeah.
know, you get hotel rooms booked
Sure.
whenever you show up. And then they were even gonna do a strip club.
Wow.
Like I think they even said brothel, dude. Like they were going, they were just like, whatever, we're gonna give you the world, right? And it worked. They got $25 million out of it. But that was like the whole industry mold of 2021 for NFTs. It's like,
yeah, that's right. Yes.
like we create some collection, some NFT, we set a price for it, we just give you this vision of like what can be,
Yeah.
and so just send us your money, right? And
yeah.
that exhausted itself to no end, to the point where we've witnessed the collapse of an entire industry,
Yeah.
like built around that model.
And
right?
there's no sight of return. There's no hope it's coming back.
Yeah, even it feels like even the industry facilitators are like vouching for that. Like,
Yeah.
this stuff isn't coming back. I think like the Solana co-founder or somebody
Yeah.
said something like,
Yeah.
on-chain gaming, NFT, like all this stuff is never coming back, guys. Like that's fucking crazy.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So and Tom Brady was setting up an NFT platform.
I remember that.
Yeah.
We still love Tom though, dude. We still love Tom. It's all right.
Still riding with Tom, dude.
Yeah. I mean, he hit Logan Paul with a football this weekend. I'm kind of happy about that.
Oh, he did?
Yeah, they did a little flag football thing,
Mhm.
and then he just like, what? Just like threw it at him right in his chest.
And he killed him?
No,
No?
I mean, Logan Paul's pretty jacked, dude.
Yeah.
It's like- just bounced.
Dude,
right
Tom
off.
Brady still got it, dude.
He definitely still got it. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I mean, it's all mechanics, right? So it's hard to lose. It's like shooting a basketball.
yeah. Also, you don't have like a bunch of dudes in armor coming at you at
Yeah,
full
yeah,
speed. It's like that helps.
Yeah,
right?
that's
That does
true.
help.
Yeah.
All right, so we've established that NFTs are not coming back.
Yeah, and like everything we just kind of described, that's legacy NFT land, right? That's how we view it.
Yeah.
That's the legacy NFT industry model. It was very successful for a short period of time, and obviously attracted even the Nelk boys.
Sure.
But that's not coming back, right?
No.
The technology of NFTs, it's preserved.
Yeah, so let's talk about the technology of NFTs. It's like if NFTs are dead, is the NFT asset technology also dead? Should anyone be building on NFTs and using NFTs? Right, that's the question that people are having.
Yeah.
And so because people are assuming that the only way to launch an NFT is to set a price and like do some hype campaign,
Mm-hmm.
they think that the technology is probably dead too.
Yeah.
And so they think nobody should be building NFTs. Like it's just
Yeah.
useless.
Pretty much.
And so, well, we disagree, right? So
Yeah.
the NAT.FUN platform is about NFTs.
Mm-hmm.
And so what problem is it if it's not, if the problem is, creators launching, setting a price, what problem did you solve? It's like, well, the mechanism of launching NFTs is the underlying problem. So if it's not the technology, then it's the way that it's launched. So there's nothing to fix with the technology itself. It's fine. It's like a unique asset, right? So what do we do different? Well, how do we solve the launch mechanism? Well, we learned a lot from Pump.Fun. And so Pump.Fun solved other problems, right? Not related to NFTs, but they solved other problems, which is bootstrap liquidity. And so when you bootstrap liquidity, that means that someone who wants to launch a token, they used to have to have a bunch of cash to see liquidity on a DEX in order for that token to be tradable. And so if you didn't have that liquidity, you had to raise funds, you have to sell NFTs, you had to
Yeah.
do something to collect funds to see liquidity so that your token has some viability.
Yeah.
So what Pump.Fun did was they used a bonding curve, which is a very old mechanism, but a bonding curve that when you buy on the bonding curve, that money that you used to buy it, you got tokens for, but that money is embedded in the bonding curve that would then seed liquidity once it graduated. So that was really cool. It was so cool that they generated basically $1 billion in a year in revenue,
Yeah.
in fees,
Mm-hmm.
right? Volumes were, 50 billion.
Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, it's around there, right?
I mean, yeah, if you've been paying attention to crypto for the last 2 years, you know this story, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It was tremendous. It was massive. It led to Trump coin, even though Trump coin wasn't launched
That's
through
true.
Pump. I mean, Trump coin wouldn't have happened
Yes.
if Pump.Fun
100%.
didn't happen. It tapped some kind of nerve.
Yeah,
right?
so Trump, obviously they have some money, so they don't need to launch, bootstrap
True.
liquidity.
They went straight to Meteor's rails
Yeah.
and like self-injected that liquidity.
Correct.
Yeah.
So the way that we saw Pump.Fun, like when it was going crazy, we sort of ignored it because it was just memes, right? But once we realized that they solved a big problem, then that's when Pump.Fun was interesting. So then it was like, why is it interesting? What did they do? Well, they solved the liquidity issue, but we saw something else as well. It was a viability test. Only about 1% or less tokens on Pump.Fun ever graduate. And so that tells us, at least from a high-level view, that only 1% of those tokens were even viable in the market.
Right.
Right? So it's like, okay, so why don't we apply a viability test to NFTs? Now, that sounds kind of reasonable.
Yeah, it's a good start. Good start.
Yeah, it's like
Good
if
foundation.
every NFT launch dumped 99%,
Yeah.
right, then that means that everything wasn't really viable, right?
Yeah.
So nothing had any viability tests. It was just like create some hype campaign, set a price, and hopefully it mints out. And if it doesn't, you're kind of screwed. The community's screwed. Everybody's just screwed.
Yeah.
Right. So now it's like, okay, let's do a viability test for NFTs. And so how do we do that? Well, Pump uses bonding curves. So why don't we use bonding curves? And it's like, well, Pump is only doing fungible tokens. How do you inject NFTs into this stuff? And then we have another problem that we need to figure out is like, but these are just arbitrary tokens.
Yeah.
That's snooze.
Yeah, because we come with a whole different like interpretive lens, I guess, that
Yeah.
most builders do not. It's
Yeah.
called DMT.
Yeah, it's not the thing Brian Johnson just took.
No, it's pretty close.
It's close enough though.
To us at least. he has like he's proclaiming he has his whole like refreshing effect after he took his dose, which was like a few days ago.
Correct.
He's already all over the podcast circuit, like evangelizing this stuff. It's like you need to take it now.
Yeah.
This is better than any sauna drip I've ever done in my life. You know, I feel completely refreshed, and that's how the lens we view crypto through, the DMT lens. That's to us that feels refreshing because what we see out there, you know, when we switch back to arbitrary lens, it's pretty dystopic. It's
Sure.
disappointing is actually the word.
Yeah.
From where we started 7-8 years ago to where we are now, it's
devolved.
It's like a desolate wasteland of disappointing outcomes, right? So we switch on the non-arbitrary lens, and now we've got like a whole perceptible, refreshing like restart moment.
Yeah.
Or at least the potential it feels like is there, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So the recipe that we're trying to concoct here is we're taking Pump.Fun's bonding curve viability test, as we call it. No one else calls it that.
Yeah, I guess not.
Yeah. So this viability test, and because they're using, arbitrary numbers, like that's not interesting, right?
Yeah.
So we're like, okay, let's do it with non-arbitrary values, and let's use digital matter theory, which is DMT, and let's combine Bitcoin's block production and pattern recognition and combine these two things. And that is what NAT.FUN is.
Yeah, meaning because there's multiple layers to that, right? There's the non-arbitrary token aspect, which is what NAT.FUN is named after.
That's right, yeah.
Which simply points to like the existence profile of a digital asset.
Yeah.
That's birthed through DMT, right? Meaning on Pump.Fun, all these tokens have a billion supply arbitrarily. It's just set that way.
Yeah.
And on NAT.FUN, they will all have potentially all unique supplies derived from some pattern that exists within the data field of Bitcoin. So that's what makes it non-arbitrary, right?
Yeah, so that
because
means
they're like tamper-proof. They shared those same imbued properties of Bitcoin. What makes it so tremendously valuable and uncorruptible, right?
Yeah, so non-arbitrary is like, how is it non-arbitrary? Well, it's non-arbitrary in the same way that hydrogen is non-arbitrary.
Right.
So what do I mean by when I say that? The word hydrogen, the name hydrogen, is a completely arbitrary word. It could have been any name, right? But it's still a hydrogen atom, right? One hydrogen atom is a proton and an electron. That's it, right? That is what a hydrogen atom is,
Yeah.
right? And so give it any other name, it's still an arbitrary name, but it's always going to be those fundamental particles, right? And so apply that to Bitcoin and its 17-year history of block production. If you find a pattern, you can give that pattern a name like hydrogen. But that pattern is not arbitrary because that is a very specific value that has, almost 200 terawatts of energy to produce that value, right? And so we're leveraging the thermodynamic properties of Bitcoin, and we're saying the information in the blockchain can be used and leveraged to create non-arbitrary tokens.
Right.
And so that's really the source of this concept.
Yeah, so with that came some challenges, right? Technical ones, I guess. Like,
absolutely.
Because, okay, all this was already kind of attempted within the bounds of Bitcoin itself, right?
Yeah.
Rewind a couple years ago, non-arbitrary tokens like NAT were born through the TAP protocol, Bitcoin layer 1, meta protocol space.
Right.
And then you quickly run into these issues with Bitcoin, right? It's not really intended for this degree of velocity, right? The chain itself, it's just not.
Yeah,
right?
That's why if you go look at the Bitcoin blockchain, almost nobody is using it.
Literally, like just look at the mempool; it's mostly almost empty.
Yeah,
right? Which is concerning, but that's a whole different video.
Yeah. So
concerned.
that tells you that Bitcoin isn't a user-friendly sort of blockchain, right? It's just not.
So that led us to, okay, these principles, this methodology, whatever you want to label DMT, non-arbitrary tokens as, it's still applicable, meaning like you could still generate assets on other chains that are referencing these on-chain data points from Bitcoin itself. Therefore, it still maintains that connection.
That's right.
But it's utilizing the higher grade fidelity, I guess, tech advantages that's native to that chain. Right?
That's right.
So we did our exploration. We looked at all the chains, and we arrived to Solana. Right?
That's right.
Which is the deployment grounds for NAT.FUN.
Yeah.
For very specific reasons, right?
Yeah. So on Pump.Fun, they're also using Solana. They have their own sort of technology now. The Pump.Fun built using Radium, right? Initially, yeah. Yeah, and then they just spun off their own thing, and then they raised another $1 billion, and that's really successful, right? So good for them. But they're using Solana, right? And so Solana is a very user-friendly experience. You do a transaction on Solana, it's basically done in less than a second.
Yeah.
And so and on top of that, the only place you could do this is on Solana because the technology is there to facilitate these bonding curves. Yeah, there are bonding curves on other platforms, other blockchains, but it's not the same, right? So we chose Solana, and then so now that every launch on NAT.FUN is a non-arbitrary supply of fungible tokens, and so where is the viability test and where does NFTs come in, right? So the viability test is you're launching a collection on NAT.FUN. It's an NFT collection. It's a non-arbitrary amount for this collection, but it has to go through a viability test, and that viability test is you deploy on a bonding curve, and can you reach a specific market cap threshold? Let's call it $100,000 market cap. If it does, those NFTs, that NFT collection gets distributed to all the token holders of that particular token.
Right.
So that means that if it does reach that graduation point, NFTs get just automatically distributed essentially for free to the token holders.
Yeah, but the interesting thing here is they may not appear as NFTs, at least not in the traditional sense. Really, what you're receiving is like a Bitcoin block, right? Because that is like what's novel here. We've essentially commodified the blocks of Bitcoin and turned them into like distribution vehicles.
Yeah.
So like where you can append a collection to some pattern that exists in some blocks, or maybe in some cases all the blocks.
Yeah.
It's all dependent on the pattern and its rate of occurrence and whatever, right? These are the non-arbitrary properties that make your collection unique.
Yeah.
And it's part of the course of like the intent behind the deployer, the designer, whatever, of like what type of community narrative you want to foster around all these like individual elements that you bring into your launch, right? And that's what makes it different from everything else.
Yeah.
But that's the unique user experience that we kind of want to offer the world, right? It's like crypto's in a state where things are just totally stale, uninspiring.
There was a tweet that you shared where I think it was an investor. Yeah, it was an investor who was talking about how he's invested less in crypto this year than any other year before it. And he's seeing a pattern, and that pattern is a lot less innovation than there was in the past.
Pretty much. Yeah, basically AI has stolen all of our, deep thinkers.
Yeah.
People who are trying to like actually innovate in some shape or form, they've all exited the crypto space and ran towards AI, where like, the shining beacon is kind of coming from. So yeah, it's, it's not a good look. It doesn't feel good. Like the industry is in a perilous state.
Yeah, and on top of that, speaking of lack of innovation, there's probably like 25, 30 platforms that use bonding curves on Solana. Like,
I feel like there's way more, but yeah.
There's probably more, 50, whatever.
Let's call it 100 just because.
Yeah. There's 100 of these things out there.
Yeah.
And all of them do exactly the same thing. You just launch memes. That is it.
Yeah, that's it. And then all the other chains that basically carbon copied this Pump.Fun model, they also only do the same thing.
Only do the same thing.
Yeah, which is kind of mind-blowing. I've been like telling the team here for several months, it's like, guys, at some point, someone's going to front run us on this idea that, we should leverage these rails for NFT distribution.
Yeah.
Like somebody else has to come to that conclusion as like NFT industry is really struggling. But there's a lot of sideline creators out there who still want to create. They still want a viable business model that they can tap into to sustain themselves so that they can, get back to what we were doing last cycle. Like,
creating.
Yeah. I don't think that's a crazy thing to support. Like, I think we need to get back to that idea. Like, creators need to be supported.
Yes.
That's how, like, all of this kind of started, but we've kind of veered away from that. And, again, it's why everything feels massively disappointing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the shocker is literally no one. And I've been like,
I agree.
Warning. I was like, dude, if we don't dab quicker here, guys, we're not going to be first to this punch.
Yes.
And I was probably saying that like 6 months ago.
At least, yeah.
And still nobody has like thrown the jab.
Yeah, nobody.
Not a single jab, dude.
Yeah, I mean, I think people have been inundated with the idea that NFTs are dead, so why even try?
Probably.
And I think that's a function of lack of creativity. There is a lack of innovation in crypto these days.
Yeah.
And it could be because the environment, the United States was basically sending missiles to crypto projects for 4 years straight, at least. And so it kind of discouraged everybody to do anything. There's developers that went to jail because they developed software.
That's true. Damn.
Of course you're not going to build anything in crypto.
Yeah. And then again, weigh your options. Like, I should probably just vibe code something instead.
Yeah, stick with Web 2. You don't go to jail for making software in Web 2.
No, you don't. So yeah, it's like we feel like that's, we have some innovative, I guess, concepts, ideas. We have some propositions here that we feel can push the industry forward a bit into some sort of like some new vector of like an inspiring angle compared to what exists today, right? And again, it's not just for the sake of that. It's also, an effort to realign industry support around the thing that's so core and fundamental to the industry's existence in the first place, which is Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Like, that's another reason or ingredient why the industry of today is in such a massive state of disappointment. It's everyone's in opposition and competition with Bitcoin. Everything is always about, we're here to kill Bitcoin, guys.
Yep. Everything.
Ever since Ethereum started, that trend never went away. And that's part of the course of like why the industry is struggling, we think, right? So this whole mechanism, this whole methodology, it's in direct alignment to Bitcoin for a very specific reason, because without Bitcoin, none of this stuff exists, right?
Yeah. I mean, Kant echoes that sentiment.
Yeah. Yeah, the Betensor guy.
Yeah, Jacob
If you don't know who
Steves.
Const is, yeah, that totally vibed and connected with us because we've been on that horse
Yeah,
since the beginning of DMT, right? It's like we can't just, even with ordinals, right? We can't just put shit JPEGs on Bitcoin and expect the world to care about that.
yeah, no,
We were saying that, like, that's not enough. You got to innovate here, guys.
yeah, yeah.
Push forward some new idea.
Yeah, so so let's get into a little bit more detail as to what exactly is happening on the platform. So, like I said, if you're a creator, you have a new mechanism to launch your creation, right?
Mhm.
You launch without setting prices, right? That's kind of a weird thing for NFT creators to do in the first place. Yeah, we've seen some free NFT launches out there, and they've been somewhat successful to a certain degree, but there is no system that sort of makes that into a machine.
Right.
So this is the machine. And so now you're a creator, you're launching this NFT collection, and you have to basically select an element, which is what we call a pattern on Bitcoin. And that pattern defines your non-arbitrary supply of NFTs, which we call UNATs, unique non-arbitrary tokens, and NATs, non-arbitrary tokens. And so you launch, and it's on the bonding curve, and then people can buy in and sell out of the bonding curve. But what's cool about this platform is when you buy in onto the curve, let's say you buy 1% of the tokens, right? And let's just say that you bought like 1 billion fungible tokens with your 1%, right? So this is a non-arbitrary value, but point is you bought 1%. But you also have 1% of the NFT supply as well. And you can actually see it. I wish we could show you, but you can actually see it on the on the platform that you bought the 1% of the fungible tokens, and you have an inventory of blocks.
Yeah. It's really cool. Trust me.
Yeah,
It looks
trust
great.
me, bro.
The interface is actually great.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of fine tuning around that again, because it's a brand new experience, meaning like, blocks are factored into the genesis of an asset class.
Yeah.
Which they've never been factored in before. So it's like, how do we translate that into the user interface, right?
Right.
So you'll see something in these token detail pages that's foreign.
But familiar.
Yeah, the whole thing is very familiar, but there's a foreign element.
Yeah.
Foreign element or two across the whole platform.
Yeah.
There's going to be a pattern occurrence widget.
Yep.
Which that gives you the entire timeline history of Bitcoin and like when these patterns occurred. Therefore, you aggregate all those occurrences. That is your supply up until now. But that implies, what happens in the future? Pattern can occur again, right? Yes.
Yep.
That means it's an expansionary token.
That's right.
Non-arbitrarily expanding. And so that's a whole new dynamic that doesn't exist in current market structures.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
But then the other thing is the block pad itself, meaning like you get the full scope and picture of all the blocks that are pertinent to this specific collection. And assuming a blockout occurs, which means all those blocks were claimed or distributed.
Yep.
You get to see who owns what.
Yeah, so we have to define some terms here. So a blockout is when you claim all those blocks, but it also means that the token graduates.
Correct. Yeah.
So that's the new blockout is the token graduates.
Yeah, I mean, if people say like, the way you build moats nowadays in the world of AI is like through taste. I mean, our taste is on full display here.
Yeah.
What people typically call graduations, we call blockouts.
Yeah.
This is just how our freaking Kool-Aid tastes like, dude.
Yeah. Not only that, it's
drink
justified too because new things are happening here.
Yeah.
Right. When new things happen, you give new things names, and so
I tell you, it's not. There's more happening than a graduation.
Yeah.
It's
a blockout, right? That's it. So once it blocks out, those NFTs get distributed to everybody. Yeah. And so they get distributed as Solana NFTs based on the creator's decision or as ordinals.
Again, per the creator's description. So
yeah.
What is an ordinal? That is basically an NFT on Bitcoin. Right?
Yeah.
So
correct.
If you weren't aware, you can actually do that. We spent several years in that space of, Casey Rodimer introduced the ordinal concept in 2022, I think.
At the end of 2022, yeah.
Yeah, and we came into that space in 2023, early 2023. So
February.
We watched the whole basically birth and growth of ordinals, and then the TAP protocol, which is like the meta protocol built on top of ordinals that enables this expansionary logic to actually proliferate.
The only meta protocol that enables expansionary assets.
Right. Yeah. So we're tapped into that. That's glued into the entire infrastructure of the platform because, again,
That's right.
it's why, we had to really mold everything that makes up, non-arbitrary tokens and DMT to an infrastructure layer that has like literally no semblance or understanding of why this thing exists and how it should be like incorporated into our systems.
Yeah.
And so we had to like really, how would you say it? Like
Mold it?
I don't want to say Frankenstein, but kind of.
Yeah.
Like Frankenstein, all these different aspects together to make a platform that works. Cross-chain.
Yeah, I would say so.
Cross-protocol. Like
yeah, it's a multi-functional system.
There you go. That's more understandable.
Yeah, we've built in the synergies, right, to make it all work.
Right.
Right. So we're leveraging TAP protocol as the indexing side to read the information from Bitcoin, translate that into a Solana contract to produce non-arbitrary Solana tokens.
Yes.
Based off of Bitcoin. Right. Because that Bitcoin has the thermodynamic property that no chain on Earth has.
Yeah.
Right. And so using DMT, leveraging Bitcoin on another chain is our part of one of our tests here, right? This is a thesis that we're putting out
for sure,
and an experiment that we're releasing to see if people, vibe with it.
100%. Yeah, and there was something I was going to add to that.
Going deeper into this, right? So now you're on the bonding curve. You're buying and you're selling. That means you buy 1%, and that means you could sell it back. Right, that's the whole point of the bonding curve. Like you don't need to like be stuck with your bags, right? If the creator says, I'm doing this art now, and you don't like it, you could just sell your bonding curve tokens, right? And so that means that you are selling the blocks back onto the curve as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so not until it graduates, that's when you actually receive real NFTs that you can go and list on the secondary at the same place, NAT.FUN, list them on the secondary, and that's where you would set the price.
Yeah, so there's a new element also added into here called a vibe feed.
Yes.
So if you were in the creator call we did like a couple months ago, that didn't exist.
Correct.
So this is like a new feature that's been added in that basically that's your real-time like signal that you offer to the market participants who are on the platform as like that is the barometer of what people have to go by as far as like what is the current existing state of a collection, and like do I vibe with it or not?
Yeah, vibeability.
Yeah, it's a vibeability test.
Yeah,
right. Literally. So like you can use an in-platform vibe code tool that we have to actually vibe a collection from scratch with pure prompting. You don't actually have to be like a sketch artist to get these things put together anymore.
Yeah, I've been testing this over the last couple of weeks, and it's great.
Yeah, I'm actually shocked by what you're putting together, right? And this part of also what we wanted to show here is like just let's live vibe a collection together.
Shit, you know what? I can show something.
Okay.
Give me a second, TJ.
Yep.
Just to kind of give an idea, and then keep in mind this tool is going to continually evolve over time, but but imagine you're sitting there either vibing on some independent platform, or you're creating a collection by scratch, or you're using the one built in the NAT.FUN. The vibe feed itself has 20 slots of display where you can either upload or you could save your vibed creation, and it displays, I think, 20 images at random.
Correct. 20 images.
Or maybe you can actually select which of these images you want to put into the vibe feed, but that gets displayed on the token page, the token terminal that people are using to buy and sell the live token.
Yeah.
So think of it as like a direct market influence on like direction for your creative journey, right? Like if you put out a new vibe and the token starts to go down, that's kind of like the market, your community telling you is like, we don't like this vibe anymore.
Yes.
You should probably switch it up. So it's like, all right, back to the drawing board. Let's conjure up a new, whatever it is. Maybe you actually do some communication and feedback with these community participants. Like, what would you like to see? well, I think it should be more pixelated, like a
Yes.
pixel art direction. Okay, let's vibe that up, and then boom, get it, generate it, populate the new vibe feed with something that's more aligned to those expectations. Number should go up, right? And it's kind of like, this is the viability test. This is the market telling you what it wants, basically.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's the mechanism of not just like price discovery, but it should help and aid creators in some sense, like actually get them towards
Yeah, and
some viable structure of a producible asset.
yeah, in addition, and so these are just examples of PFPs, which I'll show you in a second. I'm looking for something very specific here, so that way we show the range of possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
But a PFP is basically a profile pic project, and that was the thing that was dominant and successful in 2021. And so all that is just a layering system. And that layering system is just you have a base layer, and then you have you add traits on top of that base layer, and then you create like a unique picture project. And so that was the thing that was very successful as a concept. But NFTs can be pretty much anything. They could be 3D models.
Mm-hmm.
They can be 3D models that have like their own traits, right? They could be, Access NFTs. Those NFTs could be exactly the same if you want, but they could also be unique as well. So it's really ultimately up to the creator how they want to use these NFTs. We're just giving the tools that help them with their creativity.
Yeah.
Right. And so I'll show you these examples here. And this is just one very base level example, right? So our platform helps you vibe generate a collection, and that collection could be generative art, could be PFPs, could be 3D models, could be whatever it is that you want. But the system is the same, right? The process, the assembly line is the same. As you start with this base layer that looks like Brian Armstrong, right?
It sure does, dude.
So this is, and it could be a monster, it could be anything, 3D model. It doesn't have to be a human, it could be anything. But the point is, it's a base layer.
Yeah.
Right? And then in this base layer, you append different attributes, right? In this case, there's hair, glasses, mask, and then everything put together. Mm-hmm. And so this system, this vibe tool allows you to generate not only a base layer that you can even submit yourself. Like you literally draw one and submit it and use that as your base layer. And then the system will help you create traits that fit on top of that base layer and make it make sense.
Yeah.
And so this is just an example of the process that I went through in generating this whole thing.
Yeah. So to me, this is, I think the market will quickly fall in love with this aspect. I imagine, because I like the idea of being an audience, I guess, to a creator through the creative journey, the process of that, and like having an actual influence on the direction through my, basically my in real time speculative decision, right? That's what you contribute when you buy and sell a token.
Yeah. So no, let me paint the picture, right? So now you're on the bonding curve and you're like, should I buy this or not? Mm-hmm. And then below the chart that you would expect to see is the vibe feed. And imagine this is the vibe feed that you're seeing. Now, you're going to see individual PFP outputs, not this like progression. But so you see a bunch of this guys.
Yeah, one's gold, maybe. Yeah. One's like a lava dude. But it's the same Brian Armstrong, bald man aesthetic. Well, it's not always bald. But
here's some examples, right?
Okay, yeah.
You got their Bitcoin guy, you got the lava guy, the water guy, the guy on fire. So this is just additional examples. So you'll see a bunch of this stuff. And then it's like, do I like this? Yes, I'll buy. If I don't like it, I'll sell.
Right.
And so then if number go down, as a creator is like, okay, people are not vibing.
They don't like my vibes.
They don't like my vibes, right? So then it's like, okay, I need to make some adjustments. And then as soon as you're done making those adjustments, that vibe feed updates. Mm-hmm. And then number go up. It's like people like it. So I guess I'm in the right direction.
Yeah, you're making progress, and then the market we're expecting should rally around that progress, right? It's like, and then this applies to other realms of creativity, right? Imagine a film that's being built.
Yeah.
In this same like market structure where it's like you're putting together shot sequences, and then what's on display in the Vibe feed are those shots. Like imagine somebody's building the Matrix, right? And then one of these shot sequences that maybe you could play, it's like, you know, Morpheus puts out a red and a blue pill.
Right.
And it's like, holy shit, like this movie's going to be fucking badass.
Yeah.
I want to buy.
Yeah.
Why? Because the act of buying is how you support the creator. Really.
That's right.
Because a portion of these fees is being directly routed to the person putting all this stuff together. Right?
That's right.
So like, that's the difference between the legacy way of doing things, right? It's like people were selling you a vision up front, and then they were demanding your money also up front.
Yeah. The vision is we're going to put a gym.
And strip clubs.
And
brothels all over America.
Yeah.
You're going to
take my money.
Give me your money.
Yeah.
Take my card.
Yeah.
My digital NFT, whatever. That was a legacy model. Here it's more like, show me you're actually producing something of value, and then I'm going to append myself along that journey and participate in the growth of this market. And you're not getting like upfront, like none of this stuff costs anything. It's just the creator earning over time grows dependent on the influence you can generate around this collection
and the volume on the token itself. Yeah, and then so now imagine the token graduates. Like this is what people vibed. It graduated. It reached 100K market cap, and then now these NFTs get distributed, right? Essentially for free. So this essentially shows up in your wallet, and for free. So then the market gets to decide what the price is for these NFTs in the secondary. So you literally participate early in this whole mechanism, and you get these NFTs. Then you set the price for the market for the NFTs as individuals, and people will come in and say, hey, you know, I actually like this thing too. I'm going to go and take it off the secondary, and then, you know, you have a new NFT mania that ensues. Yeah. And so, so this is a good example of like what can be done, and this is a trait sheet. That way, when as a creator, you are creating these different traits, you can position these traits exactly where they need to go. And so we have a system that allows you to do that. So you can see some of the hair here is kind of misplaced. But the whole point is that when you see this as a creator, it's like, okay, I need to take this value and move it over and a little bit bigger so that it fits on all the heads, right?
Yeah.
And so that's part of like the creation process is like the AI will produce this stuff for you, but it won't produce it perfectly every single time, but you have the ability to make adjustments. Yeah. And so this is one example, and then this is like an extreme version of that output, right? So it's basically, I'm more of like a cyberpunk kind of aesthetic guy. So I like this look and feel, but others will not, right? Some people would rather stick to closer to a cartoon. Yeah. Right. So, and you got the range of things. Like it doesn't have to be humans either. It could be anything else. Like if you want to, if you're like an architect and you want to have unique buildings, right? You could do that on this platform.
Temples. I want temples, dude. The NAT temples.
Yeah.
Why not?
The temples?
The NAT nibbles. Whatever. Whatever, dude. Where are we gonna worship our glorious Lord Bitcoin from? Yeah. Because again, everything, so another, I guess, last tidbit to mention here, there's probably a ton more we're forgetting, but yeah, just keep watching. We'll keep producing content around more of this stuff, and then join the Discord. But the last tidbit of I guess value here is the NAT token itself, right? Like the whole, again, part of the name is not just like to expand awareness what non-arbitrary tokens are, what they enable. It's like to support the NAT token itself, which serves a critical purpose in doing that thing we talked about earlier. It's like realigning the industry efforts towards preserving Bitcoin. Yeah. Which for some reason seems like totally off people's
blasphemous. Bitcoin is perfect.
And some people like Bitcoin should die. Like we want a blockbuster Bitcoin, right? Yeah. We want to see it be the MySpace. We want something else to either Ethereum or Potensor or whatever, right?
It's crazy what bags do to people.
It is. Yeah, but if you have as much of a fundamental understanding of this space, this industry, the value of crypto that we have, like we understand the truth of it all, and like it all started with Bitcoin. It's always going to center around Bitcoin. no matter what.
Yeah. And so our practical approach is, well, Bitcoin isn't perfect, right? If you look at its security budget, it's on the decline. And so we have,
Yes.
using DMT, there's a token called NAT, N-A-T, which is the first token from the DMT ecosystem, which addresses this problem directly, right?
How does it do that?
Bitcoin miners are earning
Yeah.
the NAT token as they earn Bitcoin.
So it's a second subsidy to the mining network,
Correct.
which does what exactly?
It's a second subsidy to the mining network that
What does the network of Bitcoin like do? It secures,
the network.
yeah, which is everything, right? So
Every 10 minutes, it's new security.
yeah, so if we're talking about building like a non-arbitrary anchor to Bitcoin, the thing that's valuable there is the fact that it's this secured network.
Yes.
Therefore, like that data layer cannot be tampered with. It's immutable.
Yeah, so that $1 trillion network that we all love, it's only valuable if it is secure.
Right. So that means if these miners are earning NAT, we need the value of NAT to go up significantly higher than what it is today. And the way to do that is to build, powerful applications that are, built around DMT and powered by Bitcoin itself, right?
Yeah.
Which NAT.FUN is a demonstration of that. And a significant portion of the value accrued through that platform will be directed to NAT.
Yeah, so imagine the platform leverages Bitcoin block data to generate these assets. And so we're essentially tapping into Bitcoin and leveraging that data layer as value and producing NFTs and non-arbitrary tokens as a result of Bitcoin. And because we do that, we are buying the NAT token, which therefore supplies value back to the Bitcoin miners that secure the network to begin with.
Yeah.
And if you do this, if you actually solve a problem, let's say we can agree that Pump.Fun solved a problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right? It generated $1 billion in revenue.
It does like $1.5 million a day still,
Right.
even today.
And so clearly that solved the problem. So we're saying if we've solved the problem with NFTs, maybe we would generate $1 billion over a year, and we would use those funds to purchase back the NAT token, thereby bringing value to the miners, securing the network, and then extracting more value from itself, from Bitcoin, to create more assets.
Yeah, that's what we call the network effect.
That's right.
And then this is just like, believe it or not, stage one it's like, if this works, then we've got like proof of concept to kind of package this into like a formalized protocol or client, if you will, that is usable for any other application out there, use case.
Yeah, on any
that's
other
not
chain.
our own.
Yeah.
Therefore, it's like now this is like a systemic practice, if you will, throughout the industry. And again, it's realigning all digital efforts towards supporting Bitcoin, but still proliferating the things we already know and love, right? But with a new ingredient of like, innate properties to them.
We're back, dude. God damn it.
We're back.
I was going to say, so imagine, our goal here, so are you guys just trying to make $1 billion? It's like yes and no. So yes and no. But our real goal is to make an impact in crypto, right? I want to go on CoinGecko one day and see basically a toggle, right? Just like this. A toggle that says arbitrary tokens or non-arbitrary tokens.
Yeah, hopefully they're not all in the red like this. But hopefully they're nice and green. But yeah, I'm totally with you. And most likely, NAT will be number one in that non-arbitrary toggled space.
Most likely.
And who the hell knows what the rest of the page will look like? And that's kind of like the funness to all of this, right? It's an unknown, unexplored territory, right? Just like crypto has been.
That's right.
But yeah, we think this is what the space needs more than anything right now. It's a shot, an actual legitimate shot at like a new beginning.
Yeah.
A restart, refresh moment, because.
And actually something innovative. Like nobody's used Bitcoin in this way.
Yeah, nobody.
Right. So, all right, let's call it here. That has been NAT.FUN. Hopefully you guys understood what we're doing. Stay tuned to our video on Monday, which we can actually go into the platform itself. But it should also be live on Monday. If you have any questions on what we're doing or what's going on, why does Bitcoin have a security budget issue? We have a ton of those videos that explain that. And you want to know what DMT is or the NAT token itself? We have a ton of those videos as well. Yeah, so leave us your thoughts in the comment section, and we will catch you in the next podcast.
Peace.